After working with professional video editing programs, I've started using Blender and over the past 2 years edited hundreds of videos with it. It's not the typical workflow you'd find in one of these programs, but you have an example here of a tutorial that mixes a bit of video footage and pictures, and I have tutorials with tons of cuts, some overlaid pictures, everything, and Blender does a really good job at that. It has some advantages like being cross-platform, being completely free and open source. It can be really efficient for pure editing, cutting, trimming things. It's tightly integrated in Blender, so you can do motion design. It has an interesting workflow because it doesn't follow the same trend as programs in the industry. And it does have some drawbacks. For example, it can be a little slow because the engine has been written dozens of years ago. In my opinion, despite the limitations, it's much more powerful than a lot of cheap commercial programs for family, for personal use. Blender allows you to edit your videos, to work with pictures, to create transitions, to also have some modifiers on your strips, to do a little bit of compositing, to do animation, motion design, and even camera tracking, all that in a single package. We've also been working with Daniel Oki on add-ons that take the Blender sequencer to the next level. One is Power Sequencer that has a lot to do with the core editing workflow, while Daniel decided to maintain the old VSE transform tools that allow you to interactively move, rotate, scale, animate strips directly from the image preview in the sequencer, using very similar shortcuts and manipulations to what you'd use in the rest of Blender. Both add-ons are maintained, they are getting better over time, and more importantly, they are completely free. Now we've teamed up with Daniel to bring you high-quality tutorials for video editing and video editing with the vanilla Blender and then with our add-ons. You're going to learn how to create your own videos from scratch, understand how Blender's workflow works. By the end of the lesson, you'll be able to create your own videos from scratch.
In this segment, we're going to be learning some of the basics to video editing inside Blender, and that includes setting up Blender for video editing, adding files to the sequence editor, making cuts, lining up strips, and rendering the project out to an MP4. When you first open Blender, what you first see is the 3D view. We want to do video editing, so we're going to go up to the Screen Layout drop-down button, click that, and go to Video Editing. That's going to give us a layout with the timeline, the sequence editor, the image preview, and the graph editor. Down at the bottom, there's this playback menu. Inside, there are 3 options that I like to enable. The first is audio scrubbing. That makes it so that when I drag back and forth in the sequence editor, I'll be able to hear the audio for my video strips. The next option is AV sync. That makes it so that audio and video will remain in synchronization. And the last one is frame dropping. That makes it so that if my computer gets slow or that sort of thing happens, the frames can be skipped in order to play back the video at the right speed. I like to change the graph editor to the properties screen. And then in here, I like to change this to 100% so that my videos will render out at the highest quality they can. And then I'll just scroll down a little bit, and I'm going to change right here where the output format is, I'll change that from PNG to FFmpeg video. And then I'll expand the encoding layout, and where it says presets, I'll click that and change it to H.264 in MP4. And then going down a little further, there's the audio codec. I'm going to change that to AAC. And doing all that just makes it so that when we render out our video, all of the settings will be set up so that our videos are rendered out in a really good format. Now that I've set up Blender for video editing, I can save all those settings by going to File, Save Startup File. Now every time I open Blender, it will be set up for video editing. To start video editing, we need to bring in some video files. To do that, I can put my mouse in the Sequence Editor region and press Shift A and click on Movie, and then navigate to the video file that I want to bring in. So I'll click on that, and it brings in the video file. You can also just drag in the video file that you want. That works too. When a video is added to the sequence editor, the frame rate for the scene should automatically update, but the resolution will not. In order to fix this, you could either change the resolution manually up here, or you could come down here, click on Strip, and go to Set Render Size, and that's going to change the resolution to match that of the selected strip down here. I can select strips with the right mouse button, and I can hold the Shift key down while I use the right mouse button to select more than one strip at a time. I'm going to grab and move these strips using the G key to grab, and then I'll move them with the mouse, and then I'll set the position with the left mouse button. Now I'm going to bring my mouse up here, and I'm going to press the Home key, and that's going to expand the preview so that it fills up the preview window. And I could just use the middle mouse wheel as well to change the zoom of the preview there. And I'm going to come down here, and I'm going to left click and drag this green cursor until I find the spot in the shot where I want to cut. And I'm going to cut right before my hand comes in, right there. And in order to cut, I have to select both of these strips. And I could do that the way we did it before by right-clicking and holding the Shift key. But I'm going to show you another method for selecting using the B key to box select. And there, I have both of them selected. Now to cut them, I'm going to use the K key, which is the knife tool. And I want you to notice that whichever side the mouse is on the cursor is the side that's going to stay selected after I cut. So I'll press the K key, and now both of these are selected. And I want to delete them. I'll use the Delete key, and now they're gone. Now I'm going to cut the other side of this strip, so I'll left click and drag the cursor to find the spot where I want to edit. I'm going to do it right where my left foot lands, right about there, I think. And then I could select both of these strips and then cut them with the K button again. But I'm going to show you another way how to do it. I just come over here, and where these little dark triangles are, I'll click them and hold the Shift key to select this one as well. And then I'll press the G button to grab again, and I'll just grab them, and I'll move the handles, is what they're called, to where that green cursor is. And now I have edited that strip in a different way. Now I want to edit the other strip. And to get over there, I can press the middle mouse button and then drag my mouse over this way. And I can use the middle mouse wheel to zoom in and out to where I want it to be. And then just like before, I'm going to drag the cursor left and right until I find the spot where I want to cut. And so we left off last time with my left foot landing on the ground. So I'm going to cut right where my left foot is right there. So I'll select both strips, I'll use the K button to cut, I'll select both of these and delete. And then I'll find the end, I guess where I start to walk out of the shot. That's where I'll cut. And so I'll select both of these, K button to cut, and delete. All right, so now I'm going to zoom out so I can see both of them, and we have this big gap here, and I want to get rid of the gap. And I could just select both of these, press the G key to grab it and move it over like that. But I'm going to show you another way. I can put my cursor into the gap, and then I'll press the backspace key, and that will automatically line up both of the strips. So now I can drag back this way, and I want to play through and see how both of these strips flow together. So I'll press Alt A to play. And that plays out pretty well. And then I'll press Alt A to pause, and that stops the playback. So now that my clips are cut and placed correctly, it's time to set the start and end points for my scene, because otherwise my video would render out with a whole bunch of black frames here and a lot of black frames here. So to find the start and end points, I'm going to drag the cursor over this way, and I'll hold the Control key down so that my cursor snaps to that spot, that cut point on that clip. And then I come down here and I see the Blender's telling me that I'm on frame 21. So I'll come here where it says start, I'll click this and I'll type in 21 and press enter. And you can see that that's changed the start point for my scene to that spot. And then I'll do the same thing. I'll come this way, I'll hold the Control key down so it snaps the cursor to that position. I'll come down here and it says 163. And instead of putting 163, I'm actually going to put in 162. Because the point needs to be at the spot where the last frame plays out, which is actually right here and not here. So 162 is actually the end of my scene here. So now if I play through, if I push Alt A, you can see that the cursor will loop back to the start point for the scene. So now we're ready to render our project out as a video file. And before I do that, I'm going to go to File, Save As, and save it And then I will go down here in our properties window, and where it says output, I'm going to set the output path for our video file. So I'll click this button here, I'll navigate to the desktop, and I'll call it output.mp4. And then I'll go back up to the top, and there's this button that says animation. I'll click that, and it will give you an indication up there of how far along it was. And when it's done, it shows the last frame of the project here. And to get back to the sequencer, I can just click down here and press the escape key, and that'll get us back to where we can see our strips and stuff. So I'm going to go out to my desktop, and here's the video file that we just rendered. I'll double click that, and you can see that it plays out just fine in VLC. In this segment, we're going to be talking about how to generate proxies for your video clips and how to draw waveforms for audio files and why both of those skills are important. You can see that I've loaded in a video here, and one of the first things you might notice as I shuttle through this is that things are a little choppy. Notice how the green line, the cursor, is not keeping up with my mouse at all. And the reason it's doing this is because the video that I've loaded in is encoded in such a way that Blender is having to decode every frame to play it out. So to fix this, we can make a proxy file. A proxy file is a video file with little or no encoding that can be edited in place of the original video file, but then gets swapped back out when it comes time to do the rendering at the end. To create a proxy file, you first select the video strip that you want to make a proxy for. Then you come over here to the right-hand side and make sure you click the Strip tab, and then scroll all the way to the bottom, and you'll see the proxy timecode layout. I'm going to check this box here, and then right here you have an option of what you want the resolution to be for your proxy files. I just like to do 25%. That helps keep the file size down for the proxy files. And then I'm going to click this button here that says Rebuild Proxy and Timecode Indices. So click that, and it shows you down here that it's generating the proxy files. And then out on my desktop where I have the video file stored, Blender has created a folder here called BL Proxy, and inside that folder it has stored the proxy file and some data about that file right here. And so now if I go into Blender, it's still playing out at its original resolution right now. So I come up here to the preview window, I'm going to press the N key, and that's going to bring up a menu over here. And right here where it says proxy render size, I'm going to change that from scene render size to the size that I picked down here, 25%. And so that's going to reduce the resolution right here. But now, as you see, I can shuttle through this and everything is just really fast. It feels really smooth, and it's a whole lot easier to edit things this way when it's feeling really fast like this. So now that you know how to make proxies for video strips, let's talk about audio strips. So when I recorded this, I had just a normal little webcam, and this is the video from the webcam, but then here's the audio that was recorded through the microphone on the webcam. And it doesn't look really exciting right now, but what I can do is select this audio strip and then come over here, and I'll scroll all the way to where it says Draw Waveform. I'll check this box, and now you can actually see the waveform of me talking. And if I were to play through this, the audio actually doesn't sound very good at all. It's got a lot of background noise, and it just doesn't sound very good. And fortunately, when I recorded this, I recorded it with a much nicer microphone. So where I've got the video and the audio from the webcam, what I actually want to do is synchronize the audio from the nice microphone with the audio from the webcam that doesn't sound very nice. So I'm going to come out here to my desktop where I have the sound from the nice microphone, and I'll drag that in. And just like I did with this audio, I'm going to select it and then draw a waveform. And then at the beginning of the video, I gave 3 snaps. And I did that so that I could easily line up the two audios. So I'm going to pull this over here. And then I'm just going to do my best to line up the two videos so I can zoom all the way in. And looks like that's actually the best it's going to be. So now that I've got them lined up, I will right click on this one and delete. And then I want to move this audio down 1 channel. So to do that, I can just press G and move it. But if I do that, I might accidentally move it left and right. So what I want to do is press the G key and hold the middle mouse wheel button down And what that'll do is make it so that it snaps in place. And so even if I move my mouse left and right here, it doesn't move the audio around. So I'll let go of the middle mouse button and left click, and now it's set in place. And so now I have synchronized my audio, the good sounding audio, with the bad sounding audio from the webcam.
Let's see how to install the Power Sequencer and the VSE Transform Tool add-ons. If you go to the landing page on the website and scroll down a little bit, you'll find a Learn More button to learn about the features and a download link down under Get Power Sequencer. If you click here, it will take you to the GitHub releases. If you go to the GitHub repository, you could grab it from here and download the zip file if you are used to installing Blender add-ons this way. Or you can go to the Releases tab, which is where this link will take you, and you want to grab the latest releases zip file. In this case, it's this beta version. You can click here and download the add-on. You will also find a link to the VSE Transform tool in the description. It's the same thing. You want to head to Releases, so the link should take you there straight, and get the latest one. You can see the latest release tag at the top, and download VSE Transform Tools.zip. So now you should have the add-on somewhere on your computer. In my case, in my Downloads folder, add-on subfolder. So I'm going to copy this path, head to Blender, and go to File, User Preferences, and then you'll want to head to the Add-ons tab. That's where you logically manage your add-ons. Install an add-on from File, the button at the bottom. I'll paste the path here at the top to access the add-ons folder, and then double-click to open one of the files, or click the Install Add-on from File button. From there, you should see the search bar filter to Power Sequencer. Click the checkbox next to it to activate the plugin, and you can see it's now properly installed. We want to do the same for the VSE Transform tool, so install the add-on from File again, select VSE Transform Tools, Install from File, and same thing, Blender will filter the list down to this add-on. You can click the checkbox to activate it, so you can now use it in your project. Be sure to save your user settings so that next time Blender will remember to activate and load these add-ons at startup. We're going to start with the startup file by creating a template that we can reuse for all our videos. So let's head to the video editing workspace. And here, as Daniel showed you, you have the graph editor, the image preview, the sequencer view, and the timeline. I personally work without the timeline and scrub and work entirely in the sequencer view with the channels. There are a few options that we need to change first, though, as we are working. So in the playback menu, you can use AV sync and frame dropping to make sure that the audio and the video are synchronized, and that if you have performance issues, Blender will skip some frames. It will not render some images in the video so that the video advances normally in time. So let's check these two options. And next, audio scrubbing is a matter of taste. I personally not always use it. You'll see that with the add-on, when you trim video, you have automatic audio scrubbing on, so you can rely on that instead. Let's say we want to have audio scrubbing always on and check it for now. Next, there's the auto keyframe option. I personally like to have it on and to animate a little bit inside of the sequencer, especially with the VSE Transform tool that Daniel is working on now. And then using a keying set or not will be up to you. You'll probably have to create a custom keying set for your video editing work. But with that, I'm going to right-click on the seam between the two areas of the interface and select Join Area. You can see by moving your cursor which area is going to eat the other. In this case, I'm going to keep the sequencer view. I work with the graph editor always on. One thing Daniel told you is you have to go to the properties area to change the resolution of the video, especially as it's 50% by default. So when you use Power Sequencer to render, there's a tool that renders with a preset kind of automatically, and it's going to set all the properties here for you. You can even have a resolution preset, but by default, I'd say, yeah, you can set the resolution to 100% and set your most common video resolution here in the X and Y resolution parameters. But with that done, you can click at the top of the area to select the graph editor. Note that the letters are underlined here. If you type one of these letters in any menu in Blender, it's going to activate this action. So for graph editor, the key is G. And you will see later in the tutorials that you can get to use this quite a lot. Another thing I'm going to do by default, hovering the image preview area, press N to open the properties of that view. And by default, I like to have the proxy set to 25%, because on my screen, a 25% proxy fits the size of this area here. So it's optimized in terms of resolution, and it's the fastest you can use performance-wise when you are editing. And performances, the scrubbing speed, is what I care the most about when I'm editing. Note you have the option to set the Use Backdrop checker mark. If this property is on, you will see the result from your edits in the background behind the video strips. I prefer to have the view in the top right corner, but note that's an option. I invite you to experiment with it as you are working and see what you like the most. And with that, we can head to the File menu and save this as your startup file. So you can press Ctrl U to do that. Blender will ask you for confirmation. You click here, and now every time you start a new instance of Blender, you're going to start straight with the view you last had. The good thing about this startup file is if there is some branding elements or some video strips or images that you want to reuse in most videos, if not all of them, you can do that with the startup file. Place them in a shared folder on your computer, on a separate hard drive, on a USB key, whatever. And then you can drag and drop this footage from your source folder onto Blender. By default, when you do that, and it's maybe not in the same drive, you will see, if I go to the strip input with the imported strip selected, that I have an absolute path stored automatically by Blender. You don't have to worry too much about the details of that, but the idea is that Blender will recognize that this is on a remote device, for example, or that you are working on a different drive. Will store the full path to this strip, and every time you start a new project, it will go get a reference to that footage. For example, here I have the channel's splash screen, and I don't want to add it manually every time I create a new video. So that's why I put it in my startup file, and to save the startup file, to update it, press Ctrl U again and then Enter, and it's saved. Note that your startup file contains all the information about the interface, about the various views that you have, the workspaces, but also the scenes that you create, and the current state of, for example, the position of the cursor in time, the menus you have open or folded, and the scrolling level as well. It really keeps track of all that. So you can take advantage of that to make it as fast as possible to get started when you create a new video. Now we're going to work on actual editing with the add-on. So we're going to do the same thing Daniel showed you and show how you can use Power Sequencer to edit even faster. So I have my project here and a few folders next to it. So a folder named Audio, another one named Image, these two are empty for now, and one named Video, in which I have 5 video shots. I could import these files manually from Blender, but if you do that, every time you have to press Shift A, and you have to import either movies or images or sounds. You have to navigate to the folder in which they are stored and select them, import them. You can only do this one folder at a time. So if I was using multiple subfolders as well to organize my footage, this would be a bit of a pain, maybe. If, like me, you are using a lot of footage that's specific to one video that you can store inside of a project, the add-on will help you import these videos faster. You have a tool called Import Local Footage, mapped to Ctrl Shift I by default. And when you use it, the add-on is going to look in the folders next to your Blender file, and it's going to import all videos automatically. So if I zoom back, it imported my 5 shots based on their names in the same order it found them in the folders. Now, if I scrub through, it's going to be very slow. And you've seen that you can use Blender to generate proxies for you to make the videos much faster to scrub through. Another option is to use a script that ships with the add-on that's going to allow you to create proxies faster, to make transparent proxies for images, and to do that in batch for all videos and pictures inside of your project. In the add-on, right now, it's in the script subfolder. It's going to be available from within Blender later on, but for now you'll have to use Python. It's called Build FFmpeg Proxies. So it uses FFmpeg, an open source video processor that Blender relies on as well, to generate smaller resolution files for your videos. So you can open a console here, and if you have Python installed, type Python, call the script, Build FFmpeg Proxies, and then you'll have to tell it which folder it should operate on. Note that it goes down through your folder tree in the project. If you pass in the main folder from the project, we'll go look at the image folder, audio as well, but it won't do anything there, and video, and go to the subfolders, and with that, it's going to generate your files for you. So let's try this. I'm going to pass this path to the script and press enter, and now the script found all 5 videos and it's generating the proxies for us. Now moving back to Blender, I can instantly scrub and Blender detects that there are proxies and allows me to work through them a lot faster. Daniel showed you how to set the preview or render frame range at the end of the previous video. I like to do it at the start. So with the add-on, you can select strips in your view and press Ctrl Alt P. This uses the length of the selection to set the render and the preview range. So when you're done with your video, you can press A to select everything and Ctrl Alt P to set the preview range on the selection. And anytime you can use the B key to box select any of the strips you have here. If you have the add-on installed, by default, it will replace your selection because that's a slightly faster way to work than pressing A to deselect every time. And you can press Ctrl Alt P to loop only on this chunk of the timeline. It's now time to do some basic editing with Blender. We're going to do one thing first, because I have a few shots in here. I'm going to select all of the audio strips. So one way to do this when they are connected in time, like they are here, is to select one of the audio strips and press Ctrl L to select all linked strips. It's going to go up to the last strip that's connected in time. And then you can press Alt W to toggle drawing the audio waveform. This is one of the features added by the add-on. The thing with audio waveforms is if you press Ctrl Z, Blender has to regenerate them every time, so they can slow you down a little bit. In this presentation, it's best not to have them. Then I have a few too many shots to work with, so I'm going to remove the first 2. For that, press B to start a box selection, click and drag to draw your selection, and when you press X to delete, it's going to delete all the sequences instantly. It's one of the small quality of life improvements you get with the add-on because deleting a strip is undoable. You can press Ctrl Z anytime to undo and Ctrl Shift Z to redo. Blender would ask for you to confirm that you want to delete, but we don't need that. Same thing with saving. If you press Ctrl S, it will be instantaneous. Now, instead of moving the strips back to the start of the timeline, we're going to set the preview and render range on them. Press A to select all the strips and Ctrl Alt P to set the preview to the selection. Then we can press the num dot key to zoom onto the selection. If you press the home key, it's going to zoom on the frame range starting from second 0. So we're going to use dot in that case to center our view on our strips. I have a few shots here of statues from Japan. And the thing is, I want to go from the first to the third one and then to the second shot. So essentially, I want to swap the shots I have in position 2 and 3. To do this as part of Blender, there are a few tools you can use. You can right-click to select a strip and set it to be active, and then press Alt right to swap it with the strip that's connected to it in time and that's to its right, and Alt left to do this the other way around. This only works with one strip at a time, but we're going to swap the video first and then we'll swap the audio. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is to zoom down a little bit, zooming out a little bit. I can select the strip I want to put last, press G to grab and move it in time. Then I can sloppily place it on top of the other strip. And when I click to confirm, Blender is automatically going to push it after the current strip. So in Blender, it works that way. You don't erase existing videos in your tracks. Blender will always try to push them out of the current strip. With that, with the cursor inside of the gap, we can press backspace to remove the gap. Or, this is the first of the mouse-based tools we're going to see, Control Action Mouse or Control Left Click by default. So I'll select all strips again, press the dot to zoom on them, and now we're going to start trimming because we have 20 seconds of footage here for 3 shots. That's a lot. In a traditional video editing program, you would have 3-point editing. That is, before you import the video inside your sequence editor, you would set the starting frame you want to insert and the end frame. In Blender, instead, you edit everything together in the sequence editor. You don't have the notion of bins, containers for raw source footage, and the notion of tracks inside your video editor that will constrain the type of footage you can put in there, either audio or video in general. But most of the time, when you import footage, unless you are working with thousands of shots, it's fine to trim them directly in the view. I've made hundreds of videos and it's never been a problem. It's a little different, but it's just as effective. You just have to get the hang of it. I'm going to zoom on the video. For that, keep the Control key down, press the middle mouse button, and you drag to the right to zoom in and up to zoom in on the vertical axis. I'm going to center it on the view and click and drag, watching the preview in the top right to see where I want the video to start, around here, let's say. So now I want to trim the part to the left of my time cursor. And by default in Blender, to make a cut, you have to place your mouse cursor and press K to cut with the knife tool, then X to delete. That's quite a few operations for something that we're going to do a lot. So instead, if you want to cut a little sloppily with the add-on, you can press Ctrl Shift and right click. This is a tool to instantly trim from the closest cut to the position of the time cursor. So now you have a few tools to quickly cut and trim video. For one, if you Control click out not on one of the video strips, you're going to make a cut in the timeline. It's going to cut all the strips it can find. Okay, and then you can press B, drag to select the strips to the left, and X to delete them. Another way to trim them is to Control, click and drag, same thing outside of the strips. And it's going to delete everything that's within the purple area in this case. The reason you have to click outside of the strips is that the tool is smart enough so that if you click and drag on one of the strips, it's only going to work on this strip. So at the time of recording, you can override this by pressing Ctrl, Shift, click and drag, and this is going to trim the entire frame range, all the strips that are within the purple area. If you need to make a very precise trim, you can select both strips with B and click and drag, and press Ctrl K to trim from the left to the time cursor very precisely, or Alt K to trim the right side, and then press backspace to remove the gap to the next strip. So here I want to trim the left part, so I'm going to do Ctrl K. Now for the right part, I can use the mouse cut again. For the right portion, I'm going to use the instant trim tool with the mouse. I'm going to Ctrl, Shift, and place my time cursor, maybe drag around where I want to have the cut. Let's say here, Ctrl, Shift, right-click to instantly trim and remove the gap. So now let me select everything again with A. I'm going to zoom back on the selection with the period key. Press Ctrl Alt P maybe to reset the preview range. I'm going to do the same with the two other shots. So note that the trim tool is independent from the time cursor, so you can trim anywhere. It doesn't matter. Now, for this shot, I want the part at the start where the camera is not shaking too much. On the second half, it's moving a little more and it stabilizes again at the end. So let's keep the end part. I'm going to select the two strips and press Ctrl K to trim the left side. And for the right side, I think I don't need to do that. Yeah, I'm pretty close to the right cut, so I can press Ctrl Shift and select mouse to remove the gap and trim at the same time. So Control and Action mouse, or Control left click by default, is going to cut the strip you click on or arrange in the timeline, but it can also remove a gap. So you can Control click over a gap and it will automatically remove this one gap. If you have two gaps like these, you'll have to click on both of them. And with the backspace key, by default, it's going to remove one gap at a time. And if you press Shift backspace, it's going to remove all the gaps that are after the time cursor. Okay, so now all that's left to do is the third strip. By now, you know the drill. Same thing, I'm going to use a part where it's not shaking too much. And before, you can see in the top right of the image, there are some people walking down the stairs. I don't want them in here, so I'm going to keep the start only and press Alt K with the strip selected to trim the right side of my strip. So with that, I have three strips with nice cuts here. Let's see about the timing. Okay, so maybe I'd like to swap the first two. Let me do that. So again, I select one strip, press Alt, left key, and it's going to swap the two I selected. I need to do the same with the sound. So I can set the preview range on the selection, and from there, we could render. One way to render with the add-on is to press Alt F12. So F12 is the key to make renders in Blender, and Alt F12 is going to set your rendering properties automatically using a preset that you chose by default. And it's going to name the video after the scene's name or the blend file's name or the folder your project is in based on your preferences in the add-on. The idea here is that as editors, we work on the same type of videos all the time with the same type of rendering options. So for now, the add-on ships with a preset to export to YouTube, to Facebook, etc. with good default options. Note that you can add your own rendering presets, or in any case, if I go to the project folder, you can see I've got a video named scene.mp4 right next to my blend file. This is my render. It's named after the scene, and we can watch the results. Note you can find the footage, download it via torrent. It's free stock footage, free as in open source. The add-ons are as well. The Blender startup file and everything are as well. So please help yourself.